So I was intrigued by this video, or by the title, or the thumbnail, or one of them, all of them. As someone, so I've been a pastor at my church for 16 plus years. I've been in pastoral ministry for 21 years, and I have done a lot of marriage counseling, a lot of premarital, all of it. Have, read some of the best material from the Gottman Institute on the 5 love language, all the stuff that you can think of. I've just kind of read all of that stuff. And so I saw this thumbnail that said, I think we'll watch it. It says, The Dark Side of Love Languages. Now, over the years, I'll be honest, I wasn't one who really tried to use the 5 love languages in marriage counseling. First of all, I reject like a lot of stuff that's really popular initially. And then, but a lot of people were talking about it. This was years ago. It was like everyone was talking about it. And then obviously when stuff like Enneagram and all of that came out, then it became like, oh, what's your Enneagram number? And it was always that. It was always trying to figure out. But marriage has been one of those things that is just, it works and it's wonderful, but it's a challenge. And many people experience different challenges. So a book like The 5 Love Languages comes in and is like, it's apparently revolutionary. Now, what I liked about the book was that the guy who wrote it is a believer. I think he's a pastor, but he's Baptist church guy. So I'm just going to automatically, unless it says something really crazy, I'm going to automatically like it because it's coming from at least a worldview that I like. But as I listened to the book, I bought it on Audible, listened to it, and I thought, and I started thinking, could I counsel the couples that I counsel, and the counsel just be, you got to find out what their love language is and then do that, right? So I've always thought, man, that's a little overly simplistic. So then I saw this, and I thought, oh, let's watch this. I'm just curious to see what they thought. And it wasn't exactly what I thought, but let's watch this for a second. It's very quick, and then we'll talk about it.
Some of your own toxic traits are based off of your personal love language. Like, for example, if yours are words of affirmation, your probably toxic trait is negative self-talk. So, so it's like, I know.
Right, because I need someone else to validate me, because me, myself, I can't do it for myself.
Exactly. And like for me personally, mine is physical, physical touch, but quality time, which is that a lot of times I'm just go, and I don't give myself my own quality time.
So when you get it from your man, it's like even more appreciated.
Exactly. Some of your own.
All right, so if you heard what they said, they were saying that the dark side of the 5 love languages for them was that whatever your love language is, the dark side will be you don't do that to yourself well. So she said, my love language is quality time, but that means I might just be on the go. So the dark side was really about what you do to yourself if your love language is, acts of service, then maybe you don't make time for yourself and do things to bless yourself. And this is this wasn't what I thought they were going to say. But when I watched it in a roundabout way, it actually got to the concerns that I've had over the years and why I personally have not used the 5 love languages almost ever to counsel couples. And I've been at this for 2 decades. So let's first, for those of you that are not familiar with the 5 love languages, let's start with what are the 5 love languages? So here they are. They are acts of service, all right? So you like when people do things for you. They are receiving gifts. You like to get things from people. They are quality time, okay? they are words of affirmation, and they are physical touch. All right. So what the premise of the 5 love languages is that every one of us has one of these as our dominant love language. All right. So you're an acts of service, receiving. Personally, I think I'm a couple of these bad boys, but that's, I might be different. I'm cut from a different cloth. I relate to Saul, who ripped Samuel's cloak in 1 Samuel 15. I'm cut from a different cloth. But you get acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, physical touch. So these are the 5 love languages. And many people swear by the reality that this has been like, and I do not doubt that it has worked effectively for some people. When I read the book, one of the challenges I had, there was a couple, but there's one that I think is the big challenge. And this book is a book by believers, and I think it actually accomplishes the opposite of what God is asking believers to do. I think it accomplishes the opposite. So let me explain first some of the other things. So first of all, I think if you've read the book and you've used it, that's great. I think it can be a useful tool. It can be helpful if you're able to keep up with it. One of the first problems I had when trying to implement that as a marriage counselor for decades was, man, sometimes the people that I'm talking to, they're just too hurt by their spouse to do that. Like, the 5 love languages, I think, is good for couples that are not in a bad place, that may just be complacent in their relationship, but they relatively are just, it might be good for the couples that are not arguing a lot and just kind of like doing crossword puzzles and watching TV together, but not really talking, and just there's not really any beef, but there's nothing really going on in the marriage. You just you kind of get to a point, and sometimes where you're not beefing and arguing in your marriage, but you're also just kind of coasting. It's just the routine of marriage. It is what it is. I think the love languages work well in those kinds of marriages where these people relatively get along. They might get on each other's nerves some, but it's not like they're really beefing with each other, right? There's a lot of resentment and deep hurt that they got to work through. I felt like as a pastor, now maybe this dude, that's the people he's talking to. But I feel like as a pastor, man, I'm dealing with people who are really hurt, who have really said very evil, wicked things to each other, or have done really negative things to each other, and they're moments away from divorce. I mean, there are times I felt like, man, if I say the wrong thing in this counseling session, it could be the end of their situation, right? So I think that when you're dealing with a stressful patterns and habits where you're relating to each other and it's very, very volatile, very hostile, I don't think the love languages really do that. I think it's for a specific kind of marriage, but I don't think you're going to be able to do that long term. Or for some people, you can't even suggest that. I mean, I can't imagine telling a wife who has been verbally belittled by her husband for years, right? Married for a few years, and he just has been on the verbal attack with her. She responds back. They don't sleep in the same bed. They're bitter at each other. They're not intimate at all, and that stuff. To tell her, hey, his love language is physical touch, so just do this and that, and then it'll change. Like, to get her to that place, I have to do a lot of other work. And I felt like the book, and maybe I only read it one time, or read it and then listened to it on Audible. Maybe I'm missing the point there, but I just thought that's a more challenging. I mean, maybe for me, when I'm counseling people, I'm not counseling people that are just trying to spruce up their marriage. We're like, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you? It's okay. Wow, this is serious problems. These people are really hurt, and I got to help them deal with the hurt first before they can even imagine wanting to do something to serve their. Because another thing that the love languages presume is that you have a desire to serve your spouse, and some people just don't have that. So I thought that was something that was really big. But I realized as I started hearing people talk about the love languages a lot, and it's almost seemed like a formula. We're always looking for like the formula for maturity. We all want the holy zap. Lord, please help me be loving and help me love people more and all these people. And then we want the Lord to be like, zoom. Oh my gosh, I think you're the most incredible person ever. And I love, what did you say? I'm stupid? I love you though. Like that's what we want. We want to be zapped. And I mean, on one level, it's good that you want to be different. But the reality is, like in the Lord, if you're a believer, growth, maturity, transformation comes with a cost. You got to deny self, right? You deny yourself. So I've noticed that as people were talking about this, and I'm realizing these people are too offended to deal with this. But there was a darker side, and by dark, I just mean there was a part of the love languages that I learned the hard way, from personally, my own life, and just in helping people realize that, like, I think the love languages is well-meaning, but from a Christian perspective, and it was written by a Christian, I think it misses one of the key points of reality. I think it misses it, right? Let me explain what I mean. I think the love languages have created in many people sort of Mosaic law marriages. Let me explain what I mean by Mosaic law marriages. Mosaic law is about earning. You're earning certain things. You're doing things to earn sort of grace, forgiveness. You're earning favor. I've seen a lot of couples make their spouse have to earn things that God says you're entitled to give them, right? And this is, so even before the love languages, there was this sense of like, and don't get me wrong, let me just say this real quick, because some people get really offended at this. You have to understand, like when God commands believers to do certain things, God doesn't command you to respond in certain ways because he's absent of how difficult it is, or he wasn't aware of your circumstances. When God says pray for your enemies or love your neighbor, he's not unaware of how difficult that is. He became a human being and so forth, so he understands that. So when we do these things, it's not like, so when I bring some things up, it's not like I'm belittling your situation or don't know. I've walked with people through very difficult things, but God's word is God's word. Like just because I've been hurt deeply by someone, bitterness is still a root that could take me out of eternity, right? We're not exempt. So that's the challenge. We still have to obey God, even if it's challenging to do so, right? The Bible does not say, hey, love your neighbor, husbands, love your wives, unless there's no verses that say that. Wives, submit to your husbands, unless so this is the world we live in, right? So we live in between how I feel, and what we believe, right? That's always the war. What I think versus what I feel. And I got to sometimes act out of what I believe to be true, what I think, what I know is true, what God's word actually says, than how I feel about what I'm going through or what God's word actually says. For many of us, that's the battle, right? Having said that, I've seen a lot of Mosaic law marriages where you will make your spouse earn the things that God tells you to give them. So I'll watch husbands make their wives earn like affection, not non-sexual affection, like being gentle with them, kind with them, affectionate, cuddling. They make them earn that, right? You make them earn certain things. You're not thinking of trying to serve them. And this is where the love languages could be helpful but it also creates the very thing it's trying to help. I've seen wives make their husbands earn having sex, even though 1 Corinthians 7 says if you withhold that from your spouse, whether it's one way or the other, wives or husbands, it says you give the devil a foothold. You give the devil a foothold. That's just what the scripture said. God, who created us, who knows what's best for us, said if you do this, you will give the devil a foothold if you withhold sexual intercourse from each other, right? But I've seen situations where the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience. I know husbands that are impatient, rude, angry at their wives, and for them to actually be patient, kind, and their wives have to earn it. And I've seen wives who are resentful, bitter, withholding sex. Despite what God says, you have to forgive and you have to overlook offense. They make their husbands earn sexual intimacy, earn submission, earn, well, I'll cook. And so these Mosaic law marriages, I think while the book is actually trying to go after it, the 5 love languages, it kind of helps create them. And let me tell you why does it do that? How does it do that? There's something that the Lord revealed to me, that not in some prophetic way, just in my own life. This is what happened to me. I learned something about romantic love that I never thought about this before. All right. A few years ago, I was in California and I was thinking about my marriage, and I felt like I didn't like where it was. I was concerned. And I had reason to believe that. And I remembered thinking, I'm going to write my thoughts down in a journal and give them to my wife, let her read them, and then when I go on this trip, she can process it and send it back to me. And then the last minute, I ordered the little moleskin from online, from Amazon. I was ready to do it, write in it. I just felt like, nah, I'm going to hold off. So I went to this trip in California. And I was talking to a buddy of mine about my concerns for where I thought my wife and I were. And we were just talking. And then eventually I just felt like the Lord said to me, you haven't loved your wife as I've loved the church. Now, we hear a lot of different voices. This is for me when I believe it's the Lord. Here's when I know it's the Lord. When I hear something like that, and I understand exactly what's being said. It makes sense. I understand what it means and what it doesn't mean. That's when I know that's the Lord. When I'm like trying to figure it out, well, what if that? I don't know. I don't listen to a lot of voices in my head. The Lord doesn't. I don't trust that type of stuff when I'm hearing from the Lord. Other people swear by it. I just don't. But when I know it's clear, so when I heard that, I knew exactly what it meant. The Lord wasn't saying you've never tried to serve your wife all the years you've been married to her. I knew what he meant was you've tried to serve your wife in order to get her to serve you back. And I said, oh, okay. So I was motivated by trying to get her love back towards me. And what I thought about as the Lord began to prune me in this area, I realized, okay, what you're talking about, Lord, is I need to learn how to be motivated to love her by your love for me, not getting love back from her. If she reciprocates that, sweet. But I want to I got to learn to do things because it glorifies you and it serves her. But I'm not doing things to get things back from her. That's when I realized that the majority of romantic love it's selfish ambition. We think we love another person. We think we're in love with this person, right? But if you think about what love is, right? Like I've said this before in a previous video, right? There's no such thing as love at first sight. There's attraction at first sight. There may be infatuation. There may be lust at first sight. Love at first sight doesn't happen because attraction is like, oh my gosh, they're beautiful. There were times in my life before I was married, I would see a woman be like, we'd be like, I'd marry that. You don't even know this woman, but she just is pretty. And then you'd be like, I'd marry that, right? Love at first sight has nothing to do with biblical love, at least. It has to do with lust or how a person makes you feel. I love how they make me feel, right? Because love at first sight would be this. Here's the biblical definition of love. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful, right? No one sees someone and says, oh my gosh, I never want to be impatient or unkind to them. I never want to not be arrogant or rude. I never want to not insist on my own way. I'm in love. Like, no one says that. No one, no. If you said that, let me know in the comment section. You're one of the comment creators. Let me know. I've never heard anybody be like, man, I just want to never be resentful to this person as soon as I see him. I just never want to rejoice at wrongdoing. I just want to believe and hope all things. And I've never heard anybody say that, ever. What people say is, oh my gosh, she makes me feel, right? So it's really love. What we call love is really about how a person makes us feel. But then when we get into a relationship and it's romantic love and we'd say we're in love, I'm talking about as believers. If you're not a believer, cool. But as believers, when we think of love, we think we love the person and we want to spend the rest of our life. But what we're really saying is it's selfish ambition. I want them to do. So let me give you a perfect example. If you're married, you know this is right. If you say to your spouse, I love you, and they say, cool, what will happen? Now, if you're married right now and you're watching live or later, you're probably laughing right now. You're probably laughing. Because if you're a wife, you're like, I'd punch him. If you're a husband, you'd be like, what? What you mean? But if you just wanted them to know you love them, why does it matter if they say it back or not? If you really love them and you just want them to be aware, I love you, why does it matter if they say it back? You know why it matters? Because you're not saying I love you because you just love them. You're saying I love you because you want them to say it back. That's the epitome of selfish ambition. I am doing something for you or to you so that you'll reciprocate it back to me. I'd never seen this until the Lord said, you haven't loved your wife as Christ loved the church, if I love the church. I realized that a lot of my serving my wife, so let's just say acts of service. She's gone all day. I'm going to clean up the house, spick and span, just to serve her. Right? She comes home, doesn't even notice it. I don't say anything for a little bit. And then we just start talking, whatever. A couple hours go by. Still doesn't notice. And now I'm getting frustrated. She doesn't notice it. And then I just maybe an hour later, like, yeah, this place is spotless. Oh, I saw. Thank you, babe. And that's it. And now I'm offended. I'm angry. If I were just doing it because I just wanted to bless her and serve her because I love her, then why am I offended? Why am I angry? See, my reaction betrays my motive. It reveals my motive. I didn't do this because I just wanted to bless her because I loved her. I did it so she can get acknowledgement, so we can have sex tonight, so we could do whatever it was. I didn't think that was my motive, but when she did not react the way I wanted her to react, my sinful propensity revealed, oh, this wasn't about her at all. You did this so that she would do this. And this is the greatest problem I see in marriages. I kid you not, from my own to people I've counseled, the vast majority of marriages are selfishly ambitious. And even when it comes out, I will do this so that you will change. I will treat you kind so that you stop doing this to me. Not because the Lord commands it, but I'll do it so if you don't stop being unkind to me, then I'm going to stop doing this to you, right? It's a selfish ambition love. And this is what the Lord exposed in me. And this is when I realized, whoa, wait a minute. And I started counseling people and I was like, man, this isn't the kind of love that God is asking for. God was telling me, you need to do things for her motivated by my love for you and wanting to bless her. So if she doesn't reciprocate, then you're okay with it. It's not like, well, I just don't have any expectations. I don't even expect them. It wasn't a sinful disposition. It was, I need to do this because my motive for doing this is I'm loved by the Lord, not I want her to be appreciated by her. And this goes into my biggest problem, the dark side. Even the video that we watched, they were talking about self. They were like, oh, if I'm words of encouragement, then the dark side of the love language is that I'm very harsh to myself. Or it comes back to self. You see, the foundation, even though it meant well, don't get me wrong. I thank God for Gary Chapman and what he's been able to do for the marriages that have benefited from the book. I'm not poo-pooing the book, but there's a reason why I'm working on a book called The 5 Hurt Languages. Because most people have to work through the hurts that they experience to even get to the point of, I'm willing to love this way. But the goal is not do what your spouse wants so that they'll do it back to you. That's selfish ambition love. That is not the love that God is asking. God is saying, do this because I command it, not because you want them to reciprocate what you like. Now, don't get me wrong. In a perfect world, if your spouse does things back, or your loved one, whatever, whether you're married or not, I'm a pastor, I deal with marriages, right? But let's just say you're dating, you're in a, if they do things back, that's great. There were times when that's fantastic. We're not talking about should that happen, of course. We're talking about the motive for why I or you do what you do. I realize that the vast majority of romantic love almost is selfish ambition. When I say I love you and you don't say it back, I get offended. Why am I offended? We'll get in a conflict. If you don't recognize what I did, my act of service, we're in a conflict. Well, if it was just a server, why would I sin against the Lord when you don't acknowledge me when I was trying to bless you? It's because my motive in doing it was that and this is what happens. So you have Mosaic law marriages on one side, but then you have this selfish ambition, these marriages where I'm going to change to make you change. And this is exactly what I believe the love languages accomplishes. It tells people that do this, learn their love language. Here's the questions, ask them, and now this is what they love. Ask them these questions and then do this and just keep doing it. And when they come back and say, it's not working, my spouse, just keep it up. And then some people, there's a breakthrough. Oh my gosh, look, it really worked. But think about what you're asking the person to do. And Gary Chapman is not trying to do this, but I'm just trying to give you perspective that I think is where I think God is wanting us to love. It's kind of manipulation, right? I'm going to love you and do your love language so that you do mine back. See, the biblical requirement is I'm willing to do your love language if you never do mine ever, because I'm loved and my motivation comes from God. I forgive you because I've been forgiven, not because I want you to stop, because I want you to. If I forgive you only if you stop doing what you do, talking to me that way or treating me unkindly, then it's not motivated by I've been forgiven. It's motivated by selfish ambition. I want you to stop treating me this way. And I see this a ton in Christian marriages, including my own. I've seen it, and it's right there. And what I think the love language is meant to do was to help people press through, which I think has done that for many. But what I think it's done is establish a manipulative sort of practice, where the biblical practice is look, you just win people by your character. The biblical practice is that the biblical practice is not to try to do things that your husband likes necessarily to win him, but to do things that please the Lord. Let me prove this to you from here, right? Look at this passage right here. Here's 1 Peter 3, right? And it says this. Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. When they see your respectful and pure conduct, right? Do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry, or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. You see, God is saying, listen, here's how you win your husband, not by figuring out what his love language is, but by obeying God in your conduct, respectful and pure, a gentle and quiet spirit. Now, I'm not saying God isn't saying if you do that, you'll always win your husband, but God is saying, listen, if you do this, this is what is precious to God. It's precious in his sight. And so I got to the point where I realized, okay, this is addressing women, but at the end of the day, I have to do things because to honor the Lord, I have to be patient. I have to be kind. I have to not insist on my own way. And of course, we're never perfect, right? We fail, but when we fail, we go after it, right? But I have to do these things not because she needs to change and do them back to me. It's because God commands this, and I want to do what's precious in his sight. And this is to me, what I think is the downfall of a lot of Christian marriages, including my own challenges, is a lot of it is connected to a selfish ambition love that is not necessarily what God is commanding you to do. And so in helping people, I've just never really used the love languages as a book, as a method, because I think in its core, it's selfish ambition. And it creates Mosaic law marriages. It creates, you have to earn this. So I'll do this, and if you don't, then I'm not going to do it anymore. So I'm only going to do it, and I'll do it if you do this thing. So you got to earn the very things that God commands. I've sat with couples and said, listen, you're talking and treating your spouse like they have to earn kindness and forgiveness, and those are things that God commands you to do. Those are not things that you get to decide. I mean, sure, you get to decide if you want to do them, but there are consequences for that. And this gets to a deeper issue of, I think, the American understanding, the modern American church's understanding of grace. Somehow we believe, I call it the grace mayonnaise at my church, putting grace mayonnaise on the bread of life in the wrong way. I think there is a sentiment in the modern American church that says, grace allows me to not have to go as hard. Like, grace means I'm forgiven whether I truly pursue the Lord or not, whether I really go after this or not. And while I understand the sentiment, that is not what you get from the scriptures. Grace never lowers the standards for holiness. It forgives us for not keeping them, and it empowers us to go after it. But it never lowers the standard of holiness. But I think this is the modern. So what happens is, I know believers who boast about, well, I'm sorry, I'm not forgiving them. I don't care what nobody says. I'm not forgiving them. But Matthew 6 says, if you do not forgive others your trespasses, neither will your heavenly Father forgive you yours. That's Matthew 6, 13 and 14. Right? So again, there's this grace that is not biblical, and it works its way into our marriages. And we think it's love, but it's really selfish ambition. We think it's grace, but it's really Mosaic law. You're making your wife earn the very fruits of the Spirit that God commanded you to lay down your life, to love your wife as Christ loved the church. The God said to submit to your husband and respect him. And it's like, well, he has to earn that. That's where we're at. And I think a lot of marriages don't even see it. We're so Americanized. We're so psychologized. I think things like the love languages, while I think on one level it's meant well, what it's revealed is a lot of our love for our spouses is selfish ambition. I think the marriages that work through that, whether they have those categories or not, the marriages that are the most successful are the ones who work through it. This is why a husband will tell his wife after 25, 30 years of marriage, you're more beautiful to me now than on the day we got married. Now, I do not think, because I've heard many men say this, what they're not saying is you are more physically attractive to me than the day we got married. I don't think that's what he's saying. What most people are saying is we've gone through some things and we've been there for each other. We've fought, we've had dark times, we've had tough days, and we still pressed in to love each other. And now, after all of that, you are more amazing to me than the day we got married. You know why? Because the day that you got married, all there was physical attraction, sexual anticipation. You didn't have I want to be kind, be patient, not be rude, not insist on my own way. You didn't have that yet. But then when you go through, that's why that happens. So there are couples that get there naturally, but many of us are living difficult marriages, not because your spouse is not the person you married anymore. And maybe that is true. There's a complexity there. So let me not oversimplify it. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of reasons why. It's not as simple as, oh, you just are being unfaithful. No, it takes two to tango, but it doesn't mean that each person is equally messing the dance up, right? But there is a sense where the vast majority of what we think we love in our spouses and even our children is connected to selfish ambition. I will be patient and kind with my children to get them to stop being sinful. But if they disobey again, then all that's it. Go to your room. I'm tired. What are you talking about? Now that anger is trying to accomplish what your gentleness could not. You will be shocked how many of us are driven by selfish ambition in our love. And the goal is to say, you know what? And here's the way out. Here's the way out. Here's what I've had to learn that I'm still learning. I have not arrived, but I'm learning. The way to love people is not to do it so that they change or I get something from them. That's not the motive. The motive for loving people is I'm loved by him. I'm loved by the Lord, and I want to show gratitude for that love for him. That's the way to love people. The way to love people is not, I love them and I want them, but then I'm offended when they don't reciprocate that love. My children don't obey me, or my spouse doesn't reciprocate that love. That's not it. That's when your motives, your heart will betray your motives. Take it from me, man. I failed miserably over the years. And it's not that I never tried to serve my wife, but it was just mostly selfish ambition. I had to get to the point where even if I don't get a thank you, even if we don't have sex because of this, even if we don't, and it feels like, oh man, that's a good, no, it's like my actions towards my spouse or my children or anyone is not what sanctifies them. It's not what changes them. What changes them is the Spirit of God. Now, he may use my actions, like 1 Peter 3, he may use the conduct of the wife to win her husband. But ultimately, it's the softening of the heart that the Lord does. Many of us think we're being loving and patient when we're really doing it so that we get something from the person we're demonstrating it for. But I think the biblical perspective is to do it because you're loved by him, because he's been patient with you, because he's forgiven us, because he could have sent us to experience his wrath and is giving us his grace, because that's the motive. And that's what my book that I'm hoping to write begin in. I need to finish Traumatic Redemption, Traumatic Faith. And then I want to start this Mosaic Law of Marriages is next. And that was called the 5 Hurt Languages, a play off of the love languages, but it's different. It's not going to be here. There will be some markers of hurt, but it's really about helping couples realize, like, this is where we're at. Like sex is a weapon of mass destruction in a marriage because you just are making your spouses earn it. If your spouse has to earn the very things that God commands, you are sinning against the Lord. I have sinned against the Lord by making my children, my spouse, or people in my church earn the things that God says I command you to give because I've given them to you. This is what I've learned, and this is the dark side of the 5 love languages. But what do I know? What do I know? Take it for what it's worth. I've saved many marriages, though, because we've tried to deal with the reality. Let's deal with the hurt. Let's deal with why you don't want to obey God, not just do these actions in hopes that your spouse will change. That's not how it works. At least to me. It may work for some people, and praise God for you. For me, not so much. But what do I know? I'm Kirk Kennedy. Take what I said with a grain of salt, unless you got high blood pressure. See you in the next video.